I welcome you for coming here to this historical place where our famous King Kabalega was buried. This place where you are sitting now is called Mparo. It is where our famous King Kabalega was buried. According to Bunyoro Kingdom tradition, a king is supposed to be buried in his palace. So Kabalega was buried here because this once used to be his palace. They did this in order to fulfill the culture of kings, because a king is supposed to be buried in his palace. Before Kabalega came here to establish this place to become his palace, he first lived in another place called Kinogozi there. Kinogozi is along Kampala-Hoima Road, about 7 miles as you leave the town. It is said that when he was still living there, he received a slight attack of smallpox. Although the effect from this smallpox attack wasn't so big, it forced him to shift from there, and he came here. When he came here, he found this place to be quite suitable for his residence, to establish it as his palace, because of a simple reason I want to give you. He first looked around and noticed that this is a place which really could be of a security advantage. More especially, he found that this is a place which is surrounded by hills in all directions. And these hills were of Kabalega's security advantage. How did he use these hills? He would make sure on top of every hill around here, he stations there a watchman whose task was always to be on the lookout for enemies. It was the duty of that watchman on top of every hill around here, if he happened to see enemies on his side, to either send a fast runner who would come running in order to alert the king. And that king would prepare himself for the eventuality. That used to be one of the Kabalega's defense securities. Before I can continue with his reign, I want to tell you his parents. The father of Kabalega was known as Kamurasi Kiebambe. The mother of Kabalega was known as Kanyange Nyamutahingurwa. I will explain the meanings of these two names. She was called Kanyange because of her brownness. She was so brown, that's why she was called Kanyange. You see these white birds, which usually, the type of white birds which are in English are called egrets, which usually follow a herd of cattle and buffalo. They are white. In English, they are called egrets. Kabalega's mother was called Kanyange because she was brown. That's why she was known as Kanyange. Nyamutahingurwa, this is a name which depicted the beauty which this lady had. She was so beautiful that if you happened to be walking, you could not pass by her without feeling the desire of turning to look at her. That's why she was called Nyamutahingurwa, impassable beauty. That was Kabalega's mother. You see, by nature, women have got a natural magnet which makes men turn. Kabalega's mother's magnet was so great that you could hardly pass by her without turning. You see the weakness of men. Kabalega ascended the throne at the age of 16. Before he became a king, he first had a slight, some challenges from his elder brother Kabigumiri, who was trying to claim the kingship. He thought because he was older, he claimed to he thought he could qualify. He forgot that Kabalega, before he became a king, his father had named him to succeed him. But yet, Kabigumire kept on challenging Kabalega for some good years. Each one of these two brothers had followers who were in favor of each one becoming a king. It so happened that the army on the side of Kabalega proved to be much stronger. It one time chased the army of Kabigumire, his elder brother, to go and run, take refuge in Ankole. So Kabigumire stayed in Ankole. It is where he could always base himself to come and make periodic attacks on Kabalega. Until much time later, the army of Kabalega prevailed and killed Kabigumire. So Kabalega was confirmed to become a king of Bunyoro at the age of 16. He ruled Bunyoro for 30 years. Kabalega became a king when he was full of vigor, a young king, well focused, very brave. The qualities of bravery had been seen in him right from childhood. He had determination, courage, and bravery. He set up his army. He organized it and modernized it at a young age. He started acquiring guns from Arab traders. He could offer Arab traders, and he could offer them ivory, and then they give him guns. He used barter trade to acquire guns from Arab traders. So Kabalega had modernized his army of Abarusura. A good number of his soldiers were armed with guns. During 1891, by that time when Kabalega was aged 38 years of age, that was the time when the British colonialists came here with the desire of colonizing this entire region, including this Bunyoro kingdom. Kabalega, by then, a young king aged 38 years of age. These British colonialists came when they were heavily prejudiced against Kabalega. They came with such a big influence which had been made to them by the early colonial agents, one of them being Sir Samuel Baker and another one who was known as Kasati. These men did much to damage the reputation, the image of Kabalega. More especially a man like Sir Samuel Baker did a lot in his report, which he compiled in his book, which was titled Islamia. Whatever he wrote, when it reached UK, they believed this story to have been true. So much that by the time when the British colonialists came here, they came with an intention of capturing Kabalega. They regarded him to be an impossible, difficult man because of the early colonial agents who first came here, the damage of Kabalega's name they had caused. They came, the British colonials came being led by Frederick Captain Lugard. In spite of the fact that Kabalega made 3 requests for peace talks, but they were all rejected by Captain Lugard, the man who came leading the British colonialist army. Kabalega had no choice, had no alternative, apart from standing his ground as a brave king and started defending his kingdom. So a war started between Kabalega and the British colonialists from 1891. It went on. As I have already told you that by this time Kabalega's army had become somehow modern because he had by that time acquired a good number of guns for his soldiers. In his army, most of his soldiers were armed with guns, although there still were those who had arrows and spears, but the good number had guns. So the war went on. This also somehow gave a bit of courage and confidence for Kabalega to start a war against the British colonialists. So the war went on. When Kabalega had fought for a period of between 1 to 2 years, Kabaka Mwanga of Buganda also developed a problem from the whites. This was a king who became opposed to foreign religions. He resorted to killing religious martyrs by burning them. He did not stop there. He went on and stormed a Catholic parish. The people in his kingdom were infuriated to such a degree that they chased him from his kingdom. And when he ran, Kabaka Mwanga came and joined Kabalega, who by then was busy, had just started a war against the British colonialists. And indeed, when Mwanga left his kingdom to come and join Kabalega, he never had a chance of going back to his kingdom. The two kings remained together. Kabalega and Mwanga went on with the war against the British colonialists. Mark you, these two kings realized that the army they were fighting against, this army of the British colonialists, was indeed much superior, much stronger in terms of firepower and military personnel. By firepower, it means the army of the British colonialists, most of the army was composed of gunmen, men who were armed with rifles. Not only that, this was an army which contained long-range guns which could shoot very far, which were known as Maxim guns. This was an army which was composed of very, very many soldiers, composed of the following. It was made up of the Indians, the Nubians, the Swahilis. I'm sure these must have been the people who must have been picked from the coast. The Baganda, who came here as collaborators. The whites, who were all armed with guns. All these things put together indeed can prove how big and how strong this army of the British colonialists was. But nevertheless, Kabalega persisted, resisted. The war went on. Though he was fighting against such a superior army, he continued. He now resorted, Mwanga and Kabalega resorted to fighting a sort of guerrilla war. A guerrilla does never stage a permanent war front. He lays an ambush, he strikes, he disappears. So Kabalega fought a guerrilla war, such a kind of fighting, such a kind of tactics for 8 years. Wasn't he a brave man? The war continued. As the war was intensifying so much, at one time, Mwanga is said to have approached Kabalega and offered him suggestions of surrender. But because naturally Kabalega was such a brave man who never wanted to give up so easily, in answer, this is what he answered Mwanga. He said, everything in this world has got a beginning and an end. He cited him 2 examples. Say, for example, a banana plantation begins its life as a young shoot like this. This plantation grows, it reaches maturity. After maturity, its end, it goes. The same thing applies to a cow. A cow begins its life as a young calf like this, which grows, it reaches maturity. After maturity, its end, it goes. He said, we also had a beginning in this world. If this is going to mean our end, let it be. So that was the answer which Kabalega gave to his fellow king Mwanga. So the war went on, they fought on. But as you have heard, I've already told you that this army they were fighting against was indeed much stronger. By this time, the army of the British colonialists had pushed Kabalega and Mwanga out of Bunyoro to Lango. As the war was going on, Kabalega's right arm was shot through. The bullet came and severed the bone, that the bone just broke. His left thumb was also broken off by a bullet. He was holding a gun, he could no longer hold it. So the gun simply fell down. Instantly, this army of the British colonialists surrounded, closed in on Kabalega and Mwanga. So the 2 kings were captured together on the same day. It was 9th April 1899. After these 2 kings had spent 8 years engaging a war against the British colonialists. They were captured at a place which was called Kangai, near Dokoro of Lango district. They were captured and taken in exile in Seychelles. Seychelles is an island which is situated in the northern waters of Madagascar. There should never be anyone to deceive you about where these 2 kings were exiled. There are some people who say that Kabalega and Mwanga were exiled in the Cess of Victoria. That is a lie. If you would hear such a statement, always dispute it as a lie. The 2 kings were exiled in Seychelles of Indian Ocean. For how many years? Kabalega and Mwanga were exiled for 24 years. Despite the fact that Kabalega, by the time he reached Seychelles in exile, one of his arms had already been amputated. But nevertheless, he survived all these 24 years. In other words, Kabalega never died from exile. It was Mwanga who died shortly after a period of only 4 years after reaching the exile there. So the people were captured 1899, Mwanga died 1903 after a period of only 4 years. His body was brought back and his kingdom for burial, while Kabalega remained there, serving his sentence up to the end. By now, Kabalega is captured and taken in exile. At this time, it was the British who were administering the affairs of Bunyoro. The king was no more. They realized that the kingdom could never stay without a king. So they saw it fit to install one of Kabalega's sons to act as a regent king in the absence of his father, who was still alive in exile. That was the time they installed Yosia Kitehim as one of Kabalega's sons. He was installed when he was very young, at the age of 11. This was a young king who was always crying before the Bazungu, the whites. Where did you take my father? Please bring him. It became too much on them. It was like this young king was accusing them before the Banyoro for what the Bazungu had done. So they deposed him after he had ruled for a period of only 3 years. He was taken to Narweyo there. He was given land there. After Yosia Kitehimbwa, he was replaced by another son of Kabalega called Anderea Duhaga. Anderea Duhaga ruled for 22 years. This was a king who never produced boys. And according to custom, Bunyoro Kingdom custom, a king is supposed to be succeeded by his sons. And because this was a king who never produced boys, he produced a total of only 3 daughters. That is why after his death, he was replaced by another brother of his, Sir Tito Gafafusa Winyi, the father of this present king. Sir Tito Gafafusa Winyi, whose burial place I'm going to show you inside there. Inside this perimeter wall fence, we have 2 kings who were buried inside here. You will see the burial place of Kabalega. Next to it, that one of his son, Sir Tito Gafafusa Winyi, the father of this present king. As far as succession after Kabalega is concerned, I think I've mentioned the people who followed him. Immediately after him, Yosia Kitehimba. After Yosia Kitehimba, Anderea Duhaga. After Anderea Duhaga, Satito Winyi. Satito Winyi ascended to the throne from 1924. His reign ended 1967. You remember that was the time when, during Obote I regime, abolished the kingdoms. Satito Winyi's kingdom ended in 1967. All that time lag between 1967 up to 1994, Bunyoro didn't have a king. Until recently, this present government restored the kingdoms. So the present king was restored in 1994. Kabalega remained there. I have already told you that Manga died after staying there a period of 4 years. While he left Kabalega to continue there serving his sentence. Then he was released at the age of 70. By the time Kabalega was released, he was aged 70. As he was being brought as far as Jinja, reaching a certain place, Kabalega is said to have died of heart failure associated with the influenza. As he was dying, coming to a certain place, there is a word which he uttered in his mother tongue. He said, Mpumuire, as he breathed his last. So from that moment, that place where he died from, the natives there named that place Mpumude. Mpumude, which you hear of today, a place which you come to shortly after you leave Jinja, became to be known as Mpumude because of what Kabalega uttered in that place as he breathed his last. So his body was brought here for burial. I began by telling you that according to Bunyoro Kingdom's tradition, a king is supposed to be buried in his palace. In order to fulfill the norms and cultures of Bunyoro Kingdom, Kabalega had to be buried here in a place which once used to be his palace. Here we have entered into our second section of history about Kabalega. We have entered in this perimeter wall fence where our famous king Kabalega was buried. That big grass-thatched house which you can see in the distance there before you is where our famous king Kabalega was buried. When we happen to enter inside there, I will show you, you will see how the Banyoro traditionally bury their kings. Inside here, you may not wonder when you see there are several other graves around. These are for people who are in close lineage of Kabalega. If you are a Mubito in close lineage of Kabalega, you can qualify to be buried in here. That's why you can see there are several other graves around here. Inside here, when I open it for you, you will see how traditionally the Banyoro bury their kings. How do they bury? Should I explain to you? According to Bunyoro Kingdom tradition, a king's grave, after the body has been prepared, the grave has been dug, but on top of the king's grave, it is never covered with cement, soil, or concrete. It is left open. After the body has been lowered down, on top it is covered with a cow hide, a cow skin. They get a particular type of cow, which is known as a rubamba, according to its markings. They get a skin from it for covering on top of the king's grave, according to tradition. After doing that, on top, this cow hide is added on with a lubugo, back cloth. Then they make a display around on top of the king's grave of the royal regalia. Eh? Certain things which the king used in his time when he was still alive. I will explain each and every item displayed on top of the king's grave. Now I'm going to open for you. Should I? There is, we have three important rules of culture which are observed by all visitors who enter here. One most important one is that you are not supposed to enter there with your shoes on. Huh? There is another rule. Should I continue? Another rule. This one applies to only women. No one goes inside there when she's an MP. You can understand you're old enough, a member of parliament. The third one applies to both men and women. I mean, men and women. No one is supposed to enter there when on the previous night you had a bedroom game. If you can qualify, it's okay. You're very good boys. Now I'm going to open for you and you will see how traditionally, how the Banyoro bury their kings, how this famous king was buried. I will explain to you each and every item displayed on top of this king, of the king's grave. The famous king I'm talking about died 6th April 1923. So it is now 100 years since he has been lying here, since he was buried. This is what I was telling you about. Let me open the front door to allow in more light. This is what I was telling you. You can see this sort of raised platform which is rectangular before you here. Here, in the center here, is where the opening was left. After the body had been lowered down there, it was first covered with a cow hide. On top, it was added on with back cloth. So the king was lowered just in the middle here. After doing that, they make a display of some of the things which he used. The royal regalia, these artifacts. In our ancient past, the Banyoro were good at making wooden vessels. It is a basin which he showered from, purely made of wood. Here. It is one of the things displayed here. In our ancient past, the Banyoro were good at making things out of iron. They were good metal smiths. This was a hoe. They would get a sort of wooden carved handle to tie on this one for digging with. This was a Kinyoro hoe, a Banyoro hoe. It is one of the things which are laid on top of the king's grave. The king was good at smoking a pipe during his leisure time. He could want to smoke. Here, because of age, others are broken. Others are there in that basket. He could want to smoke during his leisure time. This used to be one of his indoor games he could want to play during his leisure time. In Runyoro Rutoro, it is called Orusoro. In Rugando Mweso, you could play this one. These were used as his ankle bells. The bells he could place on his two legs to alert people about his coming. You could hear him from far that it is him who is coming. Ankle bells. This was one of his musical instruments that could entertain him. A shield. This was one of his shields. A shield is something which protects a fighter. If you are fighting an enemy using spears and arrows, you would want to protect your body from the incoming arrows and spears by placing this one in front of your body. So this used to be one of his shields. It is from woven material. There is another type of shield. This was from wood, a wooden type of wood shield, hard type of wood. Another shield for the same purpose. It was his. The stools he could relax on. The drum. Of course, in a palace, you can't do without drums. This was one of his drums. These calabashes were used for containing local beer, juice, and etc., and even water. Let's go on this side. Here are drums, more especially this tall drum in Runyoro Toro, which is called the Engaija. Engaija is one of the most important drums which are played during coronation. As this drum is being played, it is accompanied with some other smaller ones. As the drumming is going on, the drumming is accompanied with this kind of instrument. You find about 9 people, each one playing this kind of instrument called a makondere. When it is one, it is called a ikondere. In plural, a makondere. A makondere. Okay. The pots are among also the things displayed over the king's grave. These used to be his slippers. This one, these calabashes were used for drawing water from the pot and possibly to drink with. Before the whites came and introduced the currency which we use today, they found the Banyoro in our ancient past using this kind of currency in the form of cowrie shells. I can't tell you which value each one had, because this is a currency which was used before I was born. But at one time, you must know it was money. The spears. Also, these spears, others are there, were his. The cap. You can see it in that picture there. This one has been preserved. The oldest one, which had been made of beads, has reduced to this level because of age. That is mine. I'm taking you to the next burial place.
How many burial places are you going to talk about?
Only that one. I'm taking you to the next burial place of Satito Winyi, one of Kabalega's sons, who was also buried next to him here. Here is where Satito Gafabusa Winyi, who was one of Kabalega's sons, was buried, who was the father of this present king. Here you may not necessarily have to enter, because it's the same style of culture which is extended here. You will see the same things which you've been seeing in Kabalega's burial place. The official wife of this king was buried next to him here. Strictly, we have only two kings who are buried inside here. Two kings, Kabalega and one of his sons. Uh-huh. Eh? Who? Andrea Duhag was buried at Kinogos. Yeah. Let's go.
You're going to start afresh.
This hut, which you can see in the distance here, is where the mother of Satito Winyi, that king, was buried here. In other words, one of Kabalega's wives was buried here. This display of things which you have been seeing in both Kabalega and Satito Winyi, that system is done only to kings. But inside here, it is just an ordinary grave because she was not a king. You will see if you open here, it is just an ordinary grave like any other. It's the burial place of Satito Winyi's mother. The one next to it was the burial place of the present king's mother. In other words, one of Satito Winyi's wives here. This is the burial place of our present king's mother. Yeah. Here, I'm bringing you to the last section of our history, a place of significance with details of history, yet about Kabalega. This is a monument which was erected here in memory of the meeting which took place between Kabalega and a white man who was known as Dr. Emini Pasha. This man came and met Kabalega here, in this place, on 22nd September 1877. He had come here to carry out a mission from the ruler of Egypt, who was by then known as Ismail Khedive. Ismail Khedive was at one time the ruler of Egypt, who had a vision of expanding the territory of Egypt, the country of Egypt, to occupy all the countries south of Gondokoro, not only there, but as far as here. Not only here, but perhaps to go as far as the Indian Ocean, so that he could have a wide area within where to operate his trade. Not only that, but also to have a full control of the Nile, right from the upper Nile down to the lower Nile, including the Great Lakes region. Those were the dreams of the ruler of Egypt, who was known as Ismail Khedive. So he knew before he carried out his vision. Down here was a powerful king whom he used to hear of, who was known as Kabalega. He saw it necessary to send to him his representative in the names of Emini Pasha, who came here. When Emini Pasha came here, he said he found Kabalega to be a man whom he found to be talkative, flexible, and he found him to be friendly, talkative, and flexible. Those are the words he used. He had described about Kabalega. Kabalega was always willing to receive visitors who would want to meet him, as long as they came and gave him his due respect. Kabalega was only opposed to such a type of visitors who would want to impose themselves on his head. He was opposed to domination. The time this man spent with Kabalega was very peaceful, because this man came peacefully and gave Kabalega his due respect. He spent with Kabalega a period of 30 days trying to persuade him, to woo him. Finally, at the end of 30 days, Kabalega said, "No, I know you carried to me gifts when you came here, but I'm not a fool who will simply give away my kingdom so easily." So this man never achieved what he had come for. It was not as easy. Kabalega was such a strong man who used to stand on his ground strongly to abide by his decisions. He was determined to abide by his decisions. He had an unwavering decision. He could never be swayed so easily by circumstances or influence. So this time, this man went back not having achieved what he had come for. I want to tell you the interesting things which transpired in the meeting between Emini Pasha and Kabalega. On that occasion, Kabalega wanted to show his visitor that he knew much about guns. He noticed that one of the bodyguards for Emini Pasha was carrying a revolver. A revolver is a type of pistol. What Kabalega did was to snatch this revolver from one of the bodyguards for Emini Pasha. It worried Emini Pasha. He thought possibly was going to shoot. But within a short time, Kabalega had dismantled this revolver in parts and laid it there. Then he watched his visitor. After a brief moment, Kabalega assembled it and gave it back to its owner. He wanted to show Emini Pasha that he knew much about guns. You may remember from the beginning I telling you that this king used to acquire guns from Arab traders. So he had a big experience in guns. He wanted to show it to his visitor on that occasion. I want to give you the description which Emini Pasha gave about Kabalega. He said, when Emini Pasha met Kabalega, he said he found Kabalega having wrapped his body with a back cloth to the level of the breasts, leaving bare his hands and shoulders. Emini Pasha noticed that Kabalega had huge muscular arms. On the right of Kabalega, he wore a metallic bangle. On the left one, he wore a root charm. On his neck, he wore a sort of giraffe skin with a single bead. Generally, the atmosphere, the general reception which Emini Pasha received from Kabalega was peaceful. There was no quarrel, there was no fighting. The man went back, although he went back not having achieved what he had come for. You would wonder which language these two people were using in their communication. Kabalega, because of dealing with the Arabs for quite long, he had acquired a good knowledge of Arabic language and Swahili. The time he spent with Emini Pasha, they were conversing in Arabic. There was no problem in their communication because Kabalega was very fluent in Arabic. Generally, that ends the story about Samuel Baker, Emini Pasha and Kabalega. It ended peacefully. Now I want to take you to another section of history about Kabalega and another white man who was known as Samuel Baker, who came after Emini Pasha. Now we are talking about Emini Pasha, a man who came here. Sorry, we will edit it.
Yeah.
We've come to another picture of a man who was known as Samuel Baker. Samuel Baker came here and met Kabalega here. He came here using treacherous, dubious means, dubious approach to Kabalega. When he came here and met Kabalega, he said he had come to assist Kabalega in the fight against slave trade. This man, because he had come on the task of controlling slave trade, used to travel with a large number of Nubian soldiers. These Nubian soldiers, which Samuel Baker used to travel with, were very indisciplined, very brutal. The short time they were here, they started committing bad things one after the other. They started demanding cheaply manufactured, they started demanding for beer and food from the locals, even beating the locals, these Nubian soldiers of Samuel Baker. Secondly, they used to harass women, even raping them. They introduced homosexuality. So homosexuality, which you hear of, is not something which was introduced here recently. It is something which was introduced here by Samuel Baker's soldiers in the 18th century. All these reports were reaching Kabalega, but Kabalega was still tolerating Samuel Baker. As if that was not enough, when Samuel Baker left this place and went to another place called Masindi, there at Masindi, only 1 mile away from Masindi town, at a place called Kijura, he built a camp for his soldiers, his Nubian soldiers. It is while he had gone there, then Samuel Baker started showing his true colors of a bad man. Because of the following things I'm going to tell you. Samuel Baker started exchanging cheaply manufactured goods for ivory. He would go to the locals and he gives them cheaply manufactured goods for ivory. They give him elephant tusks. And this used to be a business which was carried out only by the king. It could be only the king who could be permitted to go and buy ivory from the locals, and he sells it. Now, Samuel Baker by this time had interfered with Kabalega's trade. Samuel Baker could carry out military maneuvers with his Nubian soldiers in front of Kabalega's palace. By then, Kabalega's palace was at Kihand. It was only a short distance between where Kabalega had his palace at Kihande and where his Sir Samuel Baker had his camp at Kijura. He could carry out military maneuvers in front of Kabalega's palace. You can see that kind of provocation. Sir Samuel Baker's Nubian soldiers used to make open insults against Kabalega. One day, Sir Samuel Baker, as if that was not enough, hoisted an Egyptian flag in his camp, trying to indicate to Kabalega that now this entire region had belonged to Egypt without Kabalega's consent. This matter disturbed Kabalega so much that Kabalega now assembled his people in his palace to try to find out what he could do about Sir Samuel Baker. And when Sir Samuel Baker realized that there was a kind of arrangement taking place in the palace of Kabalega of Kihande, what he did was to storm the palace of Kabalega of Kihande and he burnt it down. You can see that kind of provocation, which forced Kabalega to take refuge at a place called Kibwona. While Kabalega was there at Kibwona at his temporary refuge, he said enough is enough. He organized his soldiers to come in as big numbers as they could with the name of going to surround, to besiege the camp of Sir Samuel Baker of Kijura in order to capture him, possibly to kill him. But by the time they surrounded it, the camp of Sir Samuel Baker of Kijura, the man had already escaped. Sir Samuel Baker had already escaped. He fled and escaped to a place called Fatiko in Igulu. So that a fruitless attempt of capture made by Banyoro to surround the camp of Sir Samuel Baker, because they didn't find Sir Samuel Baker inside there. They termed it Obulemu Bwabaligota Isansa. What did it literally mean? You may surround an area with the name of capturing someone, but simply because you don't find him there, simply because they didn't find him there, it was like they found inside there dried banana leaves, a sans. That's what literally meant. Obulemu Bwabaligota Isansa. This Sir Samuel Baker did not stop from there. He now resorted to writing a book which was titled Islamia. In that book, he damaged the picture of Kabalega and the Banyoro so much. Whatever he wrote, when it was received in the UK, his people at home believed it as a gospel, as true. That was the reason why the British colonialists came here with such a very big influence. They came when they were heavily prejudiced against Kabalega because of the misreporting done by none other than Sir Samuel Baker. He contributed a lot in the damage of Banyoro reputation and Kabalega. As a result, Kabalega suffered because of Sir Samuel Baker's reporting. This man acted as a provocator. A provocator does certain things with an intention of annoying you. Sir Samuel Baker was in the first degree provocator. He acted as an antagonist. An antagonist disturbs the state of someone's peace. He disturbed Kabalega's peace. He acted as a meddler. A meddler interferes into matters he is less concerned. He interfered into Kabalega's matters. So Sir Samuel Baker was a meddler, an antagonist, and a provocator. We, the Banyoro, do blame Sir Samuel Baker and attribute the Banyoro kingdom conquest to Sir Samuel Baker. We attribute to Sir Samuel Baker the disintegration of Bunyoro kingdom. We attribute to Sir Samuel Baker the decline of Bunyoro Kingdom. Generally, Sir Samuel Baker, as contrasting with the other one, the man was a bad one. This is the picture which shows the father of Kabalega, who came as the 22nd Movito king, Kamara Sikiemambe, the father of this brave king. Here is the picture of Kabalega, who came as the 23rd Movito king in the Babito dynasty. When Kabalega was exiled, after having been taken in exile, the Bazungu installed one of his sons called Yosia Kitehimbwa. It is unfortunate that the picture has faded so much. Yosia Kitehimbwa was one of Kabalega's sons who succeeded him shortly after he had been exiled. After he had ruled for a period of only 3 years, he was succeeded by his brother, Andereduhag, another son of Kabalega, who ruled for 22 years. And because he never produced boys, he had only a total of 3 girls. That is why, after he had died, he was replaced by his brother, Satitoga Fabsawini, who was the father of this present king whom we have today as a king of Bunyoro. So our present king we have today is a grandchild of Kabalega. I want to show you something which is very important, which I'm supposed to show you before we leave this office. Bunyoro, in our ancient past, used to be known as Kitara Empire. Kitara, an empire which was so big that it could stretch its borders as far as parts of Tanzania and Karagwe, parts of Kenya, Kavirondo, Bungoma. It could go up to Congo. The equatorial forest also, the equator, the Ituri forest also belonged to Bunyoro, the Kitara, Bunyoro Kitara. It could go and border with Sudan, that used to be the Kitara Empire of our ancient past. Bunyoro has so far been ruled by 3 kingdoms. Bunyoro was the mother of all the kingdoms which Uganda had. It was the origin of Buganda kingdom, the origin of Wankole, the origin of Toro kingdom, the origin of Busoga kingdom, and even Koki. It was first ruled by the Batembuzi. The first dynasty to rule Bunyoro was over Batembuzi, whose reign began from 600 AD and it ended 1350. By that time, the Bunyoro already knew the importance of being ruled by kings. You see, power usually changes hands. The same applies to kingdoms. After Abatembuzi were succeeded by people called Abachwezi, whose reign began from 1350, it ended 1500. Abachwezi were succeeded by Ababito from 1500 up to this time. The Abatembuzi dynasty lasted a period of 750 years. The Abachwezi lasted a period of 150 years. The Babito, from the time they began ruling up to now, the period has come to 520 years. We don't know after Babito which other clan is likely to replace them. In order to prove that these dynasties were there and they actually at one time ruled Bunyoro, I want you to turn your attention to this chart here. This is a chart containing 19 kings of the first Thames dynasty, which first ruled Bunyoro. They were 19. Abatembuzi were succeeded by Ababito. Abachwezi. Abachwezi's list of kings is made up of 3 kings. They ruled for a shorter period, so they were fewer in number. They were 3. Abachwezi were succeeded by Ababito. We go to the list of Babito kings. It begins with the number 1, goes 16. We continue with the 17th, 18th. The 19th is behind here. The 20th. The 21st. Kamurasi Kievambe, the father of Kabalega, came as the 22nd Mugito king. Kabalega came as the 23rd Mugito king in the Babito dynasty. After he had been exiled, his son replaced him, came as the 24th. Another son of Kabalega, Andrea came as the 25th Mugito king in the Babito dynasty. We go to the 26th, Satito Gafabusa Winyi, another son of Kabalega. Including this one, coming to this present king. So, if you count the number of Babito dynasty, the total number has come to 27, including this present king. Despite the fact that Bunyoro was ruled by so many kings as you have seen, but a king who stands supreme with the biggest history was Kabalega. Why? What makes Kabalega more popular than other kings is because he resisted colonialism. Go to any part of the world, wherever people read history, they say they have ever read about Kabalega. because Kabalega became so popular by resisting the colonialists for 8 years. This gave him a very big name. He earned a very big name for himself. So Kabalega is remembered for his courage, his bravery. When he was captured and taken in exile, the entire Bunyoro kingdom had a very big loss, mourned for his disappearance. His soldiers, his people, the entire clan of Babito made a very big loss. It was a very big blow to the Banyoro. In all of East Africa, wherever colonialism was introduced, Bunyoro felt the biggest pain because the Bazungu did a lot to punish Kabalega, to punish the Banyoro, because he resisted them. He resisted them for so many years. They did a lot to punish the Banyoro for whatever Kabalega did. As a result, Bunyoro lost a lot of its territories to Buganda. They wanted to appease the Baganda, who came as their collaborators of the Bazungu, the whites. Bunyoro lost its territories to Toro, to Ankole. It was reduced in order to make a once big and powerful kingdom to become very weak. A lot of its cattle, Bunyoro had a big number of cattle here. All were lost as a result of punitive measures done by the whites, the British colonialists. So I want to take you out from here, and I take you to our second section of history.